right, Kendra Thompson, welcome to the WealthTech podcast. I'm excited to have you on the show. Just wondering if you could give a brief introduction and also an overview of Epok Advice.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Thanks for having me. So my name's Kendra Thompson, and I am a 25-year plus veteran of the wealth and asset management industry. I've worked on both sides of the border, and both as a client and predominantly in the consulting space. I recently left a Big Four firm to start my own boutique. It's called Epok Advice. And we work with boards and executive teams on the future of advice and investing, what investors care about, what they need and want, and how is the industry delivering that to them in compelling ways and transforming to be sustainably profitable as they do so. My clients range from all asset classes and models. I work a lot with private equity firms and wealth tech founders as well.
I certainly want to get into both data and AI, and the two really can't be separated. But before we get into that, let's talk about the future of advice. Where the wealth management industry, how is the delivery of advice changing, and where does it kind of break down in terms of what the investor needs and what's being delivered by the industry?
At the heart of our industry is a conversation between an individual, their family, and people that they trust. And really, that hasn't changed over years and years and years. The degree to which we can see and influence and be part of that conversation has evolved over time. And what we focus on in that conversation has evolved over time. And the way we enable that conversation through technology has evolved over time. But the heart of our industry is really about humans taking something they care deeply about, in this case, money and the outcomes and the inputs to money, and putting it in the hands of organizations and individuals that they have entrusted to guide them, support them, and get a better outcome. Where the shift is going is really around enhancing and improving the inputs and the outputs of those conversations, ensuring the right conversations are happening at the right time, and that they are informed by the full context, both institutional context and broader life context of the individuals participating. That the actions on the back of those conversations are less expensive and less risky to implement, and that there is better follow-through, feedback, and iteration as it relates to a multi-decade, hopefully, relationship with a client and their family. The coolest things we're seeing right now are about all of the in-between conversations. So I would say if you look at what we've done since 2008 and all of the major sort of first generation platform modernizations, a lot of what we've done is try to remove paper, remove friction, improve the consistency, and in many cases, document the basics of those conversations and the needs and wants and specific servicing preferences of those client families. But a lot of times what was happening up until recently was all of the pre-work and all of the post-work was a little bit disconnected to the records we kept and the way in which we actually facilitated what was going on between the humans. Over COVID, when we really saw broad acknowledgement across the industry that we needed digital, we could not sit anymore in a digital versus human debate. All of a sudden, we enabled collaboration, we enabled virtualization, we invested in both advisor and client digital capabilities. And those have been awesome. And what you're seeing now, Mark, is the next level, the introduction of unstructured, a prioritization of notes, much richer use of insights and prompts, much better feedback loops. And then the removal, which is really a frontier that we've neglected, real deep removal of unnecessary work, especially in the most expensive places like the front office and the handover between the front office and operations.
Yeah, I still think there's probably some ways to go, right, in terms of modernizing the advisor. Some stats that the amount of administrative and non-client work that they do is still over 50% of what they're doing. And obviously you're seeing a lot of improvements in those areas. AI with note taking certainly has facilitated that. The new account setup has been streamlined and automated. Do you see, is there going to be a push down, a democratization of wealth management, where what was previously at a higher net worth level, investable asset level, coming down to more of an mass affluent level?
All right, let me compartmentalize that into two pieces. So first, let me respond to why there is still an administrative burden and friction with the field, because I think that is a really important thing to understand if we're going to solve it. And the reality is, what we've done for so long is focus on the front end of the value chain. We've focused on onboarding, but not any of the servicing use cases. We've focused on financial planning, but none of the reporting or servicing capabilities. And oftentimes, hidden work taking place within advisor teams or within advisor home office collaboration was totally missed. So a lot of what needs to still occur is to take the things that are working well with advisor enablement and the removal of work and apply it to the full value chain. And I really believe there's a lot of work still to be done there. It's not the sexiest or the most likely to get you a growth ROI, but it does free up capacity and increasingly capacity constrained advisor teams. And the need to address that capacity is a priority for my clients. So that's how I would answer that first part. The second part around democratization is one of my favorite topics, Mark. And like, there's so many levels on which I feel this topic. So just at my heart, I am deeply passionate about the value of financial advice. I believe the work that we do as an industry is meaningful and that it should be made available to all investors, and that there is a huge human and economic potential that could be unlocked if we got the scaling of access to advice right, and then we improve the way we delivered advice to mass and mass affluent investors. And I believe there's a way to do it that's physically possible and valuable. I do not believe the barrier at this stage is do the investors themselves have an appetite or a willingness to engage in digital first models. I think we've proven that appetite exists. I don't believe the issue is that it's not physically possible to develop compelling digital experiences. I believe we've proven, but we have yet to fully realize that full potential, where you think of digital capabilities such as the robo of old and human capabilities like semi-dedicated advisors or non-licensed sales support as capabilities on the platform versus channels that could be in conflict with each other. So the way I like to think about it is the install base of those consumers are either within traditional universal banks or within traditional self-directed channels, and they're often underserved, overfeed, and frankly, disloyal. And what we've found is when you make a business case of just optimizing the heck out of that channel, you get businesses that get a lot of volume, but not always a lot of profit. And you get some underwhelming client solutions, limited offerings. What I believe the answer will be is in really defining for the bottom end of high net worth what a truly virtual first, fully flexible model could be. Break the paradigm of graduation between mass affluent and the bottom end of high net worth. Really invest where you know you could do it profitably, and then figure out which pieces of that puzzle could be applied to emerging investor profiles. I don't believe the answer is in robo with a call center. I believe the answer is in really understanding the patterns of need and bringing the best of technology and humans to bear for those patterns in ways that are less about down selecting or graduating clients once they have or don't have the right amount of money, or once they hit a specific age. And instead, I think the answer will be in really designing for a user group set that are profitable and then figuring out how to extrapolate that beyond.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I think you especially take a look at maybe folks earlier in their career, maybe they don't have that investable asset, but they're on a career path. How do you get them earlier? How do you nurture them? And I would agree to your point too. I think the financial wealth management, it's a noble profession, right? And there's a tremendous impact that you can have positively on people's lives. And if there's a way in which we could get more people earlier, I think that would be certainly a good thing. Let's talk about some of the underserved markets. Obviously, that next gen or the future client is one of those, but also women. How has the wealth management industry fallen down on serving women?
This has been a topic I have done tons of research on, talked about for years. I've done full advisor roadshows, training people on how to connect with women. I have run very specific campaigns and transformations around specific use cases that matter to women. I think the thing to think about is, first of all, women have always been part of the equation on both sides of the conversation. They just haven't always owned the final say, and they haven't always had the share of voice, and they haven't always been in the room when we designed the industry. And I think that's increasingly changing, and I think that's increasingly good. So just like millennials walked into the room and pointed out all sorts of things that could be improved about our business, I see women and the pushback that we're seeing from different profiles of women as a source for inspiration and innovation. And I think we should really embrace it. The second thing is women make up a huge part of the market, and they have all different subsegments within. So when I work with clients, I tend to help them focus on women in transition, women who are new to motherhood, women who are experiencing divorce, women who have lost a spouse, women experiencing dementia or caring for a family member with a serious long-term disability. These types of transitions actually bring out the nuances of what women need and want. In general, we find women are much more interested in understanding and being understood, that they're much more interested in the outcome rather than the mechanics of money. That does not mean that they are not able to understand or looking for performance. It just means that what motivates them is what they can do with their money. What motivates them is who benefits from their relationship with wealth. And the other thing that we find is, in general, women are quite loyal and quite self-controlled clients. When you have volatility in the market, they are often very good at pausing and getting the right advice. They tend to be less looking for the next bright, shiny investment, and they tend to really invest in the relationships they build. So this is great for our industry. The problem really has to be that we have some catch up to do. We need to help advisors do a better job of engaging with and listening to women all of the time, not just when they're in transition or not just when there's a new opportunity for that advisor. We need to increase the sort of partnership and social dynamic and the empathy in which we work with female clients. And doing that, it's not hard for great advisors to do that. By the way, they all do that. Like if you look at top performing advisors, they're wonderful with their female clients in almost all cases that I've observed. The trickiness here is scaling that and getting an entire workforce of advisors to do the right thing and not be transactional and not be rushed and not talk over. I think the other thing to understand, it just in general, is the power dynamic of the industry is under pressure from all of the emerging investor demographics, including younger investors. This idea of advisor as access, advisor as expert, advisor as more in control of the outcome. That's being challenged by lots of demographics. That's part of what's created a disconnect with women. So the more we can help our industry, whether they're dedicated advisors or virtual advisors, or even enrich digital experiences, empower and partner and act more like a friend, coach, and part of a broader team with female investors, the more likely we are to win.
Sounds like good advice just in general, um, regardless of the gender. Let's talk about, we talk about scaling a little bit. Why is it so hard for advisors to scale? Like, a lot of them reach a certain, you know, client plateau, and it's either, well, I don't want to hire more people, like and they kind of level out a little bit. Why is there such a struggle with scale within their advisory practices?
Yeah. So there's so many layers to this. So the first layer I would say is I have so much empathy and connection to what it must be like to be an advisor in today's day and age, where someone could be like chat GPT in the conversation and getting advice from the entire
You're like a
world at
doctor,
the same
right? They
time.
get the same problem.
It's really hard to put yourself out there, Mark. Like, I can't
Yeah.
imagine, and it's not getting easier. So the first thing I want to say is that advisors are humans. Many of them have a certain way that they've been working, and it's hard to shift those behaviors. Many of them have had lived experience of putting trust into a new assistant, a potential partner, a home office team that has exposed them. And feeling exposed in sales, and specifically in high empathy sales, is one of the worst feelings you can feel. Like, I'm in your living room trying to earn your trust, and I feel like the firm or my assistant or my technology does not have my back. And so what that does is cause most of them to do the same things over and over again. Many advisors will look to spend time with the clients that they get the nicest rapport with, and often that means they're missing opportunities to grow within their installed clients. Many of them are hesitant to introduce new things. And even when they know they want to modernize, even when they hire or have one of their children join their practice to help them get ahead of the trends, even then they're hesitant to do it at scale. They'll do it with their trusted few, but they may not roll it out to everyone. An exception to this recently, though, has been notes. I've seen almost everyone very open to adopting notes, which is exceptional. And then I think the other thing is there is trade-offs involved with scale. So scale in and of itself is not valuable. It can be distracting. It can be collapsing. Scale of the right type of work at the right profit, at the right service promise is what you're looking for. And what I've learned over the years is there is no exact answer. For some, that means grow a bigger support team, like grow a bigger team around me so that we can do more of the same with more similar families. And in some cases, it's get fewer families, but scale our footprint within them. And in some cases, it's be very, 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 very laser focused on what we do so we can do a lot of what we do well. And we will release either to the firm or to other partners the work that we don't believe is a fit for us. And I think the thought process around what to scale, how to scale, and then how to ask for help with scaling it's really complex, and it's a moving target. The best advisors are right there, ready to answer all those questions for you. But when you look at a large group of advisors, many of them are a little bit overwhelmed or confused about where to go for first and who to trust as they think about where scale will come from.
Yeah, I think those are all good points. I think it's not necessarily scale growth for growth's sake, right? They want to grow intelligently. They want to be able to service their clients better and to be able to take on the particular client profiles that they can best serve. You think it's interesting about note taking? I think it's we had Doug Fritz on recently, and he saw that around note taking, I think the adoption's like 70% in terms of advisors adopting that technology and saving them like 3 to 4 hours a week, which is fairly significant. Where AI, let's talk about how that's impacting them. Obviously, note taking's the classic example, or one of the more easier ones to implement. Where should advisors be on their AI adoption journey? Where are we in terms of AI really impacting the industry?
So AI is part of almost every conversation I have. But I think for those of us that have been around for a while, I'm careful to have it be the next bright, shiny thing that is everything and nothing. And I actually am seeing really great innovation around AI. So, unlike maybe the blockchain conversations or the ecosystem conversations that I've had that feel similar, I feel like the AI conversations are actually getting legs. Um, when I think about the use cases that I see most, they fall into a few key places. The packaging and consuming of raw material in advance of a judgment call, whether that judgment call is for an advisor or whether that judgment call is for someone in risk or in the product team. So think about all the similar use cases we use for robotic process automation. Think about all the things we talk about whenever we're talking about swivel chairing or rekeying or multiple documents or scanning. Those type of use cases, they're no brainers. Like if we can get a lot of information in front of a decision maker so that they have a better opportunity to make smarter, faster, better decisions, then that's great. The other place I'm seeing a lot of innovation is around things like next best conversations or triggers around servicing, specifically those that are not systemic or calendar or like profile based. Like, so everyone who has their birthday today gets a card. That type of trigger is not compelling. But where you do have in real time situation shifts, whether they be market or weather or something related to behaviors around attrition, and you can shift that to an actionable insight for advisors or service teams, those use cases are worth their weight in gold. And often that opacity that where we just can't see what's going on until we receive the phone call or we receive the request, those use cases are really intuitive for advisors because, you know, all of them have been in a situation where the phone rings and they're like, what is this person going to want? The other place where we're seeing it is really on coaching and time management. So helping with collaboration, helping with what to do with your next available hour, helping understand who and how to work smarter within your team. So think of like the old advisor like you or teams like you type use cases, but doing that in real time with a feedback loop. And then, of course, everyone's prioritizing agent style use cases. And really, like if I take a step back from that part of the answer, Mark, what I would say to you is everyone should be using AI in their life, as whether it's planning a vacation or preparing for a meeting. Whether they do that in real situ with a client and their family yet will depend on how ready they are and what their firm has enabled them for. But they should be using it on their private life for sure. And then everyone should be prioritizing understanding what their firm is doing and how they can participate and provide feedback to it. So what I always worry about when we get new technology is you have someone who's disconnected from those conversations that matter most, who is cooking up those use cases and pushing them out. And then when those use cases fall flat, we say, well, AI didn't really matter to advisors. What I like to see are firms that really engage and have a fast iteration. And that's what I do with my clients, right? Is I really ensure that they pick the right killer use cases first. And then I really prioritize how do you get some sort of win on the board that will get its own advocacy from the field.
I think that's good advice in general. I think one of the things that often gets overlooked in kind of project management and implementing new systems or technology changes is momentum, right? And one of the best ways to get momentum is to get some early wins on the board. Success follows success, right? And I think AI is definitely one of those trends. Like it's kind of like moving to the cloud, but the cloud took a while, and it took really COVID to kind of finish the deal. Where AI acceleration is just much faster, but then you're also seeing the returns are much faster. That the 10x return is not necessarily hype on certain use cases, right? That there are some particular use cases that are really well suited for it. I think alternative investments in general is one of those areas where there's so much unstructured information. Like the industry hadn't evolved from like 1996 and a PDF, right? Like it is, we're literally transforming that aspect of the business, which is great to see. What are some of the other major wealth management trends that you're seeing in the industry?
So, I'm spending a lot of time in the ultra high net worth family office space, and I'm seeing a real revolution in investment in technology there. I think there has been um, um, some fractional models and some various different vendor success, but what I'm seeing now are like much more sophisticated platforms emerging to support much more complex collaboration in service of the wealthiest investors. Certainly, really understanding uh, what lives within a firm and what can be systematized or standardized, and where the secret sauce is within any one advisor practice or business or any one client archetype need. For years, we were using almost like a cardboard cutout approach. Like, here's Sally. She represents all 35-year-old women who are up and comers. We have much more sophisticated knowledge around personalization and groupings of clients that are both demographic and needs based, but also situational. Like, so someone in this situation needs these types of servicing. So really modernizing everything related. To those value propositions and how you can make them much more compelling and much more profitable, and how you can do that within your firm and with the intermediaries outside your firm. And then we've already hit on democratization. That's a super hot one. You hit on alts. That's a super hot one. Maybe another one that I'll just talk about is core platform replace. So as someone who's been living and breathing in this industry, I have yet to see this amount of interest in modernizing the core, modernizing operations. This is something that typically is a sort of once in a 20 years, once in a career type set of transformations. And we are really seeing a lot of interest, some new vendors entering the North American market, and some very big players making bets on taking meaningful work out of their platforms. And then I guess, there's tons of interest related to consolidation within the RIA space. I could go on and on, Mark. There's so much exciting work going on right now. The way I would frame it is everyone is moving. We no longer see, at least in my travels, I no longer see clients defending a tiny piece of turf. Almost everybody I speak to in financial services seeks to lead with advice and seeks to do so enabled through technology. And then the question is, how will they play into their own strengths and do it in a better and more compelling and sustainably differentiated way? And that's really what I spend almost all my time working through with individual clients. And it's such an exciting part of the modernization of our industry.
Yeah, this personalization at scale or turbocharging the
Yeah.
advisors, the interesting trend. It just allows them to be able to do the more meaningful work at a greater level. Um, Technology gone wrong. Let's talk about where firms can kind of make better technology decisions. How do they avoid failures? How do they get better outcomes? I think certainly firms struggle at all sizes. Um, with being able to get good returns and good results from technology. How can firms make better decisions on that?
So, the first, which is often the last to implement or the least attention given to, is really around the operating model and the governance you have as it relates to technology. Um, I'm a big believer of a platform strategy. So regardless of which business line owner, which channel owner might have the compelling use case, whatever is built ought to be built quickly for that channel with the contemplation of its broader application on the platform in mind. That sounds so obvious, but it's something I still see clients struggle with. Optimizing in channel is intuitive to anyone with a P&L, but optimizing in channel in service of a capability that will have legs for other channels seems to be something that falls down. They either overcomplicate delivery to that individual channel owner in order to get it right for the platform. therefore underserving everyone or delaying everyone, or they allow for too many spot solutions and they just end up with a spaghetti mess at the end. So that's one governance operating model, really understanding your platform strategy and really having a move and reuse vision for that platform strategy. The second thing is, I think you got to move away from design by noise, net new capability add, tack on. I mean, this whole mental model that we've had across so many of the advisor desktops and client portals of like a portal with like lots of different apps you can get into. We really need to move away from that. I think it's great to have a strong foundation of data and infrastructure and killer capability apps. And many of those capabilities are clearly owned by a small group of vendors. And it's hard to make a case for not going with one of those core vendors. But then when you start to talk about the wrapper and the way in which you provision the experience out to users, I think you need to be careful not to just add more apps on top of apps. And I think, again, it's going to sound super intuitive, but I still see clients struggle with it. That means understanding what the conversation is or what the work is and designing from the outside in. It means just as much what you stop doing or what you remove as what you add. And I think in general, it's much easier to galvanize an organization around filling a gap than it is creating consistency within the system. And then I would just say, like, increasingly, I advise clients to avoid conversions and avoid putting massive data transformations ahead of getting something out. I think we have had for some time, every roadmap has 3 to 5 phases. Nobody has confidence in phase 3, so they front end everything in phase 1 and 2. Creates all this risk. We then end up with something kludgy. We lose the trust of the users, blah, blah, blah. I would say for me, having much more iteration, having much more gratification for the users, whether they be advisor users or home office users, and then iterating quickly and making that part of how you work, I think is one of the best things we took from Agile and from the Silicon Valley mindset. Some of the other things we took from them having been MVP, sustainable, but that one has, I think there's a lot there. And then the last thing I would just say is don't become entrenched. There needs to be a constant reassessing and stress testing of your roadmap, of your stack. In fact, that's one of the biggest things that I do with CTO clients. Like most of my clients, Mark, are exceptionally deep in what's going on, where they're going, why they're going. They have killer teams. They know their stuff. They rarely come to me and say, I have never thought about this, or I have no idea what the answer is. But in general, what I do a lot of times at CTO is strategic stress testing and helping them quickly iterate what is working, what do we need to finish delivering, and what do we need to pivot away from so we can deliver something else that didn't exist when we drafted the first version of this roadmap. And this is where leaders need to understand that the work of a CTO has shifted. You can't say, well, this guy pitched me or this gal evangelized this particular vendor as the second coming, and now they're telling us to move away, and therefore that person has failed. The success is in being able to iterate and to figure out how to get the momentum and not be stuck in analysis. And so for me, those are the things that it really takes.
Yeah, I think those are all really good points. Previous career was a product manager, and I think a lot of those principles apply. I mean, the more iterations you can put into a particular system or capabilities, you just build that level of maturity into the product, right? Ensuring that it works for a broader set of use cases and it works consistently, and meets the expectations. I think iteration's key. I think the other one is, like, to your point, the hard part's not necessarily figuring out what to do. The hard part's figuring out what not to do when is really part of the thing. Like, you have limited resources, you have really unlimited demands to a certain extent. And how do I prioritize? What's going to give me the biggest bang for the buck? How can I deliver some of those bigger bangs early in the process without having to go through a complete big bang type of technology process that takes you years to deliver, and it's still because you don't have those iterations and it doesn't quite meet the mark. I think those are all good.
Yeah.
And then, the final point, I think having that technology roadmap and constantly updating, it should be a living document, right? That's your North Star. It's directional. You don't necessarily need to follow it to the T. It should be constantly being updated. But how does that particular point solution, you see this with family offices too, they have a particular problem. They go solve the problem. They get a solution for the problem. And then, like you said, they end up with a spaghetti mess with a bunch of point solutions that are integrated. I'm not able to take advantage of that data in a more holistic way. And maybe I solved a tactical problem, but I lost the strategic war on that one. So I think those.
Yeah. One other thing I didn't mention, which is it actually ties really well into what we were talking about earlier around AI, is understanding based on your firm's culture and based on your priorities, the degree to which you are enforcing adoption or hoping to woo adoption. With AI and where we could go, so much of it is dependent on the data being there in the first place, and so much of the data that's going to have a meaningful difference, whether it comes from front office integration and interactions, or whether it comes from all of the work that's taking place in the middle and the back of the value chain. It really depends on adherence and use of core systems and some of these more, let's just say, not fully adopted parts of the platform. So a big part of what I'm thinking through right now in my work is, it's one thing when you're in a bank-owned firm where adoption is mandatory, or in a more traditional like private banking model where you're an employee and these are the tools that you use. But in our North American advisory model, where so many advisors have side ways of doing work, have done things offline, have not bought in, have not adopted, let's say financial planning as an example, where you don't have adoption, you won't have enrichment. Where you don't have adoption, you won't have data that can be then used as the triggers. And so a big part of what I'm seeing is this new desire, not only to iterate, but to re-engage with advisors on this sort of concern that they've had for years, that things are over-engineered or things are being engineered by Big Brother for tracking purposes, and shifting the dialogue around, okay, no, we need a certain amount of your engagement. And in order to earn that engagement, we're going to iterate with you and respond to your feedback faster. You can trust us. But in exchange for that, you'll have your data in the data lake, and that data will be able to be used to create much more compelling reporting, as an example. So that piece there, that's more the human piece. Again, Mark, it often comes down to the human piece.
Well, I think to your point too, there's a lot of talk about AI and how great AI is, but if your data is not great, AI is not going to be great, right? It's like garbage in, garbage out. Like having good data, having clean data, having consolidated data, it's so important to be able to leverage these capabilities that are coming out. Where do you see the wealth management industry? I don't know, maybe 5 years is too long, given how dynamic the industry is going, but 2, 3, 4 years out, what's the future hold?
So I have line of sight onto what the next couple of years will look like for many of my clients. I know what they're working on now, and I can see it, and I'm super excited. And in general, when I work with teams, I'm like, don't design for what's in market right now, because almost everyone I know has really compelling changes on almost every frontier underway. And that makes me really excited, because what I see that as the realization of some things that we've been talking about for a long time, whether that be better integration across households and accounts, better collaboration within teams or with servicing, whether that be better next best conversation insights, whether that be finally better reporting or enriched client virtual experiences. So much of what we've promised has yet to be fully delivered, and I have a real excitement about some of what's coming out over the next bit. The second thing that I think we're going to be seeing is the first attempts to really challenge what will replace what we had for years been calling robo, which is like asset allocation, product selection, low touch advice. What will replace that for digitally first consumers? And I'm especially interested in what the monoline disruptor brands might do there. They've had some setbacks, as you know. They've had some innovation that was maybe ahead of its time or maybe not fully realized. And I am not 100% sure which one of them will emerge, but I am confident some of them will emerge with much richer, much more humanized, and much more sophisticated advice experiences at scale. And I think that'll be really interesting. And then I think I'm most excited for the incumbents or the more established brands that really decide to be willing to move faster than their peers and go away from iterative small improvements within channel and take something that says, what is the best of this platform and how can we bring that to market in a new and better way? And again, I see the signs, both in operating model and technical feasibility of that. I think it'll be really exciting to see who moves fastest and hardest. And I really believe that, that is within reach for a number of my clients on both sides of the border.
Well, you know what they say, the future's here. It's just not evenly distributed. So
Exactly. I think I'm going to use that one, Mark.
I forget who exactly had the quote, but yeah, I like that quote because it's true. It's true. It's just there are capabilities out there that are here today. They're just not maybe deployed as broadly, and that some people are, and that they're going to be able to take advantage of that first mover advantage. I think there will be a Robo 2.0. I think there was some good learnings from Robo. I mean, new account setup and the streamlining of new account setup.
Oh, yeah.
See a lot of that coming from that experience and those capabilities. And what's the next iteration of that will be interesting. What I always like to do, Kendra, is finish up these podcasts on a personal note. 3 questions that have nothing to do with wealth management or wealth tech. You're from Canada, so I'd like to ask you what people might not know in the U.S. about Canadian culture.
Well, based on recent events, I feel like way more than I thought. So I am a Canadian, born and bred. I've worked and lived all over the world, and I have spent a significant amount of my career and continue to spend 50% of my time in the US or with American clients. So I do believe I'm uniquely positioned to see both Canada's perspective of the US, specifically for our industry and more broadly as a person, and then the US perspective of Canada. I think in general, it's hard to penetrate Canada. So when I work with wealth tech founders, they often think of Canada as just as another region or another state or something that they can do at the same time. I specifically see this, by the way, Mark, when I'm dealing with non-North American vendors that want to enter Canada and the US at the same time.
Yeah.
And I see it with private equity players. They're like, look, I bought a bunch of RIAs in the US. Why can't I just snap up a few independents in Canada? There are complexities and ways of doing work and ways our regulatory framework works that just do not translate easily. All of the basics are the same, like the things investors need and want are very similar, but for instance, the concentration of Canadian banks are really different. As a Canadian person, though, I think it's a value difference, and that value is shared by many Americans. There's so many Americans that I work with that are similar to me, but ultimately, we are founded and continue to exist on a basis of the we rather than the me. And our entire economy and our entire structure skews more towards a European mindset than it does towards an American mindset. And it's one of the reasons why I think Canadians and Americans make good teams together, because I think there's a lot of things Canadians can learn from the pace of innovation and the way in which Americans think about progress. And then I think there's a lot of things Americans could learn, both individually and broadly, about what it means and what is the purpose of society and being part of it, and taking care of each other is something that Canadians really feel strongly about.
Certainly our nicer cousins. That's what I like to think of. I think
just be careful we don't become distant cousins. That's what I'm pushing for, a little bit of a de-escalation of some of the rhetoric. I'm
better ally, no better I'll just leave it at that. We have no better ally than Canada, and we have probably the most in common with. But there are differences. There, it's not the 51st state. Or it's not a northern state. It certainly has its own culture. What is your favorite spot in Canada?
I live in Toronto. I went to school in Montreal, which is a killer city if you're young. I don't know if it's my favorite spot, but it's definitely one of them. My family has a cottage in Muskoka, which is beautiful. That's where all, you know, the sort of summer vacations take place. But my favorite spot in Canada is Georgian Bay, which is where I cottage now with my family. So it is much more raw and rustic and remote. So, you land at what we call the station, because it's like an old train station at the end of a channel, and you boat 45 minutes out into open water, and you spend time with your family on a very remote island. Everything's boat access, and it's quite rugged, many places without electricity, and very, very beautiful. There's actually quite a few Americans where we go, many of whom are from sort of Cincinnati, old industrial families, and they would have steam-shipped up to these areas in Georgian Bay. But that's definitely one of my favorite places in Canada for sure.
I'm going to throw one out there. I was just recently in Victoria.
Oh, beautiful.
Beautiful city. It's so livable, so gorgeous. The ocean, the big mountains, like sign me up. I mean, my God, that is a fantastic place. So
Lots of wealth there. That's very interestingly, Victoria in the Confederation of Canada. And if you ever have a chance to read, there's a great book on the founding of Canada called Dominion, and in it, it talks about Victoria and a group of Americans that had decamped to the Victoria region who were avoiding some of the dynamics in the U.S. and who really played a key role in the founding of Canada as a nation by insisting on train and port access for them and the businesses that they were trying to build. So Victoria played a massive role in Confederation for Canada. It has a major role to play in our partnership as the seat of the province of BC, but it's also a great example of what it could look like to have a really livable, beautiful place where everyone enjoys nature, but also is part of the economy.
you like to ride bikes too. It's a great area.
Yeah. Yeah.
5 to 6% of the population commutes by bike, which is
Yeah.
great to see. Yeah, it's just a fantastic location. So just finishing up here, I'm sure Greg, you're going to have an opinion on this. Tim Hortons or Dunkin' Donuts?
I've never had Dunkin' Donuts, I don't think, outside of an airport, and I would never judge based on that. So I will say Tim Hortons, but I'm not a big Tim Hortons girly. I think the commuters, the people who, go through drive-throughs on their commutes or who are sitting in hockey arenas are much more likely to be big fans of Tim Hortons. But I'll say Tim Hortons just for loyalty to the Canadian culture.
Well, I'm a Bostonian, so I'm going to say Dunkin' Donuts because Dunkin's is from the New England area. Their iced coffee is like unicorn blood. It is. I don't know how they do it. I try to make it home. Can't even come close. Like it's
sugar and fat. That's
no. I take it black.
All of us get addicted. No,
you don't mess. This is perfection. Like you don't.
Oh, is it?
You don't touch it. It's so good.
Oh, all right. Okay, you've inspired me, Mark. I'll give it a shot. I'd say for me, I have to find a Dunkin's that's not in an airport so I can judge it fairly.
This Dunkin' Donuts iced coffee black, believe me, it's so good. So anyways, Kendra, it's been a great conversation. I really appreciate you sharing all your thoughts.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. And, I really appreciate what you're doing, trying to bring leaders together. I hope we have a chance to continue the conversation.
Me too. This will be great.